The scene transitions to a much warmer moment as the freed captives reunite with their families. A man rushes in frantically, calling out for his daughter Isabel, and she collapses into his embrace. He apologizes again and again, overcome with emotion for failing to protect her. Nearby, Karen and Yura watch the scene unfold. Yura can't take his eyes off it, guilt written all over his face. Karen notices and asks if he's starting to feel remorse. Yura quietly admits that he is. Karen responds bluntly, saying it's too early for regret. Ending up in the Baron's prison like the others might have actually been the better outcome for him. Confused, Yura asks what he means. Karen explains that Yura will be heading to the fortress along with his boss, Michael, who's still lying there missing a hand. Yura questions why he's included. Even Sabina asks if they really aren't going to restrain him. Karen explains they need someone to help move Michael since he's in no condition to walk. Still, he warns Yura not to get too comfortable.
At that moment, some of the freed prisoners speak up, asking if Yura will also be punished. Karen confirms that, technically, he's still a bandit like the rest. However, one of the men steps forward and says that although it may be bold to speak, Yura actually treated them kindly while they were imprisoned. He secretly provided medicine to the sick and shared food with those who were starving. Because of that, they're asking for leniency. Sabina turns to Karen for his opinion. He says they should at least take it into consideration since Yura also helped guide them to the hideout. Yura becomes overjoyed, immediately pledging lifelong loyalty to Karen. Karen quickly shuts that down, reminding him not to lower his guard. Just then, Leo calls out, saying he's found something worth seeing. They open a barrel, and Karen's eyes widen as he asks if it's what he thinks it is. Inside are magic stones. Meanwhile, the townspeople are celebrating, watching as the captured bandits are escorted away. Leo comments that Rohan will probably host a grand feast to celebrate. He cheerfully waves at the citizens, but Karen remains silent, clearly deep in thought. Leo asks if he's being ignored. Karen explains that everything makes sense now. There was a reason such a large group chose to hide in such a remote mountain region. The Baron's family likely had no idea there was a magic stone mine within their own land. He's unsure of its quality, but even so, a mine like that could generate enormous profit. Leo internally panics, wondering what kind of scheme Karen is cooking up now. Sabina mentions that Rohan has arrived to greet them. Rohan welcomes them as the others begin escorting prisoners to the dungeon. Sabina says she'll handle the bandit leader and asks if that's acceptable. Rohan agrees, but says he has a request. She responds that she's only acting as a guardian here, so he should speak directly with her students. Rohan explains that a modest banquet has been prepared and invites them to eat and talk. Karen immediately apologizes, saying they need to return to the fortress as soon as possible. Leo looks crushed. He was clearly hoping for that free meal. Rohan then brings up the payment for the mission, explaining that their territory lacks the funds to pay the fortress and asking for a delay. Karen's eyes gleam with interest, and Leo immediately senses trouble. Karen says he was wondering why the bandits would settle in such a barren place, and now he understands. Rohan, confused, asks what he means. Karen explains that Bella's territory is remote and lacks any notable resources. It's essentially just a rural backwater. Rohan struggles to hide his irritation, but Karen continues, saying the bandits were after something else entirely. He reveals a magic stone, shocking Rohan. Karen asks if he was aware of their existence. Rohan denies it completely, saying he had no idea there was a mine nearby. Karen then proposes a deal. Rohan asks what kind. Karen suggests a joint development of the mine with the fortress, on the condition that the fortress provides the initial funding and security. Rohan's mind races. Even without considering development costs, simply storing the stones and maintaining guards would be incredibly expensive. However, having the prestigious Rest family involved could be a major advantage. He starts thinking it might be worth it, but at the same time wonders how this kid even thinks he can negotiate something of this scale. Karen adds that he'll need to report the matter to his father, but if it goes through, stationing fortress knights there could boost the region's economy and solve its defense issues at the same time. A perfect win-win. Rohan asks what share the Duke's house would want. Karen replies that such details would need to be discussed with his father, as he himself isn't qualified to finalize them. Meanwhile, Sabina watches proudly as her young student successfully initiates a business deal at just 13. On the way back, Karen asks Sabina something that's been bothering him. He questions why she said things at the bandit hideout that could have complicated the situation. She brings up the black mage. Karen asks if it's because he was just an ordinary opponent. She reveals his name, Ted Delarda, a Class 2 wanted criminal in the Empire and a Sixth Circle dark mage. Karen is completely caught off guard. She explains that he was a high-level fugitive operating within Imperial territory, alongside deserters from the Southern Kingdom. Meanwhile, Karen and Leo were too focused on minor enemies to notice the real threat. She emphasizes that growth comes from facing stronger opponents. If Karen had prioritized defeating the Black Mage, he wouldn't have wasted time. Because of that, she considers the mission a failure and tells him to remember that lesson. Leo, standing nearby, wonders why he feels completely left out of the conversation. Sabina then turns to him and says he actually performed better than expected. Since it was likely his first time facing undead enemies, he should be proud. Leo brightens up immediately. Then she adds that he needs more confidence and maybe a new haircut once they return to the fortress. Back at the fortress, Heinrich welcomes the Lord, noting his return. Halo asks if anything unusual occurred. Heinrich reports that the knights sent west have come back, and that Karen and Leo have also returned with Sabina. Suddenly, a butler rushes in, shouting urgently. Halo asks what's wrong. The butler says a letter has arrived from the Imperial Palace. Confused, Halo notes that the Emperor hadn't mentioned anything before leaving the capital. He reads the letter and is completely stunned. The Emperor has personally summoned Karen to the capital. Soon after, the train arrives at Chonghai. Yura steps off, carrying Michael over his shoulder like a sack. He drops him, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the fortress. It's far larger than he ever imagined. Michael, still bitter about losing his hand, warns Yura not to believe anything that Brat said. According to him, they'll both be thrown into prison at any moment, and if they want to survive, they should run the first chance they get. Yura responds by punching him, telling him to shut up already. Leo and Karen watch the exchange, clearly entertained. Yura snaps back, reminding Michael that he was the one who called him useless and told him to die. So why would he help him escape now? Just then, Pale arrives, bringing his usual chaotic energy. Karen lights up at the sight of his father. Pale asks Sabina how things went, and she says it was manageable, mentioning that he was summoned as well. Pale confirms it, saying it's probably because of whatever Karen pulled off in Baron Bella's territory, calling it a massive headache, though he also notes Karen looks quite pleased with himself. Leo gives a formal bow, politely asking how he's been. Pale responds that he's heard Leo performed impressively during the mission, and word of it has already spread. His older brother has likely heard as well and will be happy about it. Pale then suggests they head inside to rest, noting they must all be exhausted. As they walk forward, the group begins to move deeper into the fortress together. Sabina asks if he has any idea what's happening within the Empire lately, because everything feels off. Pale starts sharing what he's heard. Those so-called influential families, aside from theirs, have all started aligning with each other. They're gathering under Duke Salmon and Maris Diaz. Halo had originally planned to meet several noble houses in the capital to figure out what was going on, but after his discussion with the Emperor led nowhere, he called the whole thing off. Pale explains that Duke Salmon and Maris Diaz were the ones who overthrew the former emperor and placed the current one on the throne, meaning they're the ones who truly hold power now. Sabina's brother had distanced himself from central authority after the empire was reorganized, believing it was the best path forward for everyone, and now this is how they're being treated. Sabina remarks that it seems like the era of peace is coming to an end. Pale agrees, saying whether they like it or not, their family will have to take action. Sabina then points out that what his son accomplished might actually benefit them. Now they have a legitimate reason to station troops on their lands and expand their influence. She adds that his son is quite impressive for managing to pull off something so advantageous at just the right moment. Pale gets flustered by the comment, thanking her awkwardly, only for Sabina to clarify that she wasn't complimenting him. Meanwhile, Karen and the others return, and Zur greets them, saying he's heard about the deserter situation. Karen gestures toward Michael, identifying him as the leader, and Zur says he'll interrogate him while he's still alive. Hans asks about the man carrying the bandit, and Karen replies that he's a bandit as well and should be taken along. Yura immediately starts to panic, but Karen steps in and explains that Yura is acting as an informant, telling them to go easy on him and release him later since he plans to keep him as a personal servant. Karen then says he's heading off to rest, but Zur immediately shuts that down, reminding him that the mission isn't finished yet. He still needs to submit a report to review the operation and improve future missions. Karen asks if they need to write separate reports, and Zur says they can do it together. Karen's eyes light up. Perfect. Since he did most of the work, Leo can handle the paperwork. Leo argues it would be faster if they worked on it together, but Karen tells him to think carefully. Once it's submitted, his father will read it too, meaning Leo should highlight his own achievements as much as possible. This is his chance to earn recognition. Leo agrees, though he worries that putting his name in too often might backfire. Zur starts getting annoyed and tells Hans to just take the prisoners already. Then Sabina casually tosses the Dark Mage's severed head to Zur, saying the boys can submit the report under their names. With that, she and Karen walk off, leaving Leo stuck with all the paperwork. Leo calls out, asking where Karen is going, and Karen replies that he's heading to the training hall since he's reached the 4th star and can now train there alone. Zur watches him leave, thinking that if the kid is heading straight to train immediately after returning, it's hard to believe he's only 13. There's clearly something different about him. Later that night, Halo gathers everyone, saying he has something important to discuss. Zur mentions he's brought what was requested. Halo reveals a piece of hide taken from a monster that appeared in the Western Ferment Plains. At first glance, it looks ordinary, but the dark energy within it isn't normal. It's the black ether of the evil emperor. His sons are visibly shaken. Pale points out that the evil emperor has been dead for ages, so how could his power still exist within monsters? Halo interrupts, saying there are only 2 possibilities. Either remnants of the emperors will still linger, or the evil emperor is somehow still alive. Either way, it must be connected to the strange developments within the empire. He also mentions that news from Bella's territory has already reached the emperor, who has personally summoned Karen to the capital. Raphael looks displeased, while Pale is left stunned. Halo says he won't send Karen alone. Leo and a group of knights will accompany him. However, he plans to hear Karen's opinion first, and if he refuses, he won't force him. Tails questions whether that might cause issues, but Halo dismisses the concern, saying Karen is still just a child. More importantly, he wants to understand why Karen made that deal with Bella's son in the first place. He orders them to bring Karen in immediately. At that moment, Karen is in the training hall, completely unaware that he's about to be summoned for a family meeting to explain his unauthorized business decisions. Mid-training, he notices Zur and asks when he arrived. Zur replies that it wasn't long ago. Karen mentions that aside from direct family members, Zur is the only one allowed into the training hall, yet he's never actually seen him enter before. He asks what the emergency is. Zur gets straight to the point. Karen will likely be heading to the capital. The head of the family wants him at the council meeting, and he'll hear the full details there. As they arrive, the butler opens the door, and Halo asks if Karen enjoyed his first mission. Karen replies that he did. Halo immediately shifts to the main issue, what happened in the Barren Lands. Karen didn't have the authority to make business deals on behalf of the family, so why did he act on his own? Karen internally realizes this isn't praise, it's a lecture. Halo asks if it ever occurred to him that his actions could be seen as disrespectful toward the Bellis family. Karen calmly responds that he simply made an agreement with Bella's son, who accepted it willingly. Besides, he believed something more important than noble etiquette was at stake. Halo asks what could possibly matter more than courtesy to a noble. Karen thinks for a moment before answering, the family's honor. Halo seems pleased with that response. Considering how valuable the deal is, Karen could have claimed all the credit for himself, but instead he prioritized the family's benefit and stepped back. That shows good judgment. The fact that he's not being punished for making an unauthorized deal is just an added bonus. His uncles watch him closely, clearly analyzing his every move. Halo concludes that the deal Karen brought back benefits the family greatly, and Pale can handle the remaining negotiations. After all, there's nothing wrong with a father profiting from his son's efforts. Pale states that he'll head to the Barren Lands at dawn. Then Halo brings up the Emperor's letter again. The Emperor has summoned Karen to the capital, as news of him has already spread there. Karen recalls that, According to Zur, the letter arrived even before Halo returned, making him wonder just how efficient the Emperor's intelligence network is. Then it clicks. The current Emperor is merely a figurehead. It must be the powerful nobles behind him gathering information. An awkward silence fills the room, and Halo tells Karen that if he doesn't want to go, he doesn't have to. He's likely already realized what going to the capital would mean. The noble houses there will want to evaluate him, and staying out of the spotlight might be the smarter choice. Zur looks at Halo, puzzled as to why he's even giving Karen a choice. Karen answers without hesitation, of course he'll go. It's also been a long time since he's seen his grandfather on his mother's side. However, he asks if he'll be going alone, pointing out that Leo was part of the mission as well. Halo replies that if Karen goes, Leo will accompany him, along with Han's squad for protection. Karen questions why that's necessary if his grandfather is there. Halo immediately shuts him down, telling him not to get ahead of himself. They're not assigning guards because he's important, but because no one knows what kind of trouble he might cause next. Later, back in Bellis territory, the negotiations are being finalized. Pale thanks them for their efforts and asks Rohan if his father has agreed to the terms. Rohan confirms that he has. The mine's shares will be divided 80% to Resstun and 20% to the Bellis barony. Since magic crystals are incredibly profitable, even a small percentage is significant. However, allocating 5% out of that 20% specifically to Karen and Leo is an unusual condition, and not particularly favorable for the Bellis family. While the two did accomplish their mission, granting them such a large commission is extremely generous, especially for a top Imperial Academy graduate to approve. Rohan explains that it's an investment. He wants to build goodwill with them while they're still young. Pale calls him out for not even trying to hide his intentions. Rohan continues, saying he's betting on the two of them as future leaders of the fortress. Pale admits it's a bold and shameless move, but he respects it. Baron Bellis is fortunate to have such a capable son. Rohan laughs it off, saying he's nowhere near as brilliant as Pale. Finally, Rohan turns to the boys, saying it's time to hear their thoughts. Karen, practically seeing profit in his eyes. Meanwhile, Leo just watches him, wondering why he's grinning like a madman again, because deep down, Karen is just thrilled about the money. Back at the station, Leo turns to Karen and says he's got something on his mind. How exactly are they dividing the shares they earned? Karen answers casually, saying he'll naturally take 9, leaving Leo with 1. Leo blinks, clearly surprised, asking if he's seriously taking that much. Karen looks confused as to why that's shocking. Leo argues that they've been getting along pretty well lately, so hearing that feels a bit off. Still, he doesn't even bother pushing the issue and just accepts it. Karen tells him to keep that same energy if he ever decides to complain later. Pale watches the exchange, commenting that when they were younger, the two of them fought non-stop, but now they've become inseparable. Honestly, that man is seeing things that aren't there. Karen just finessed Leo out of 90% of the shares. These two aren't inseparable. One's a calculating strategist, and the other keeps falling for it every time. The scene shifts to the brothers talking, and Leo is completely losing it. He's freaking out, saying he can't believe they're actually heading to the capital. He's only ever heard rumors about the place and has no clue what to expect. Karen stands there unfazed, telling him to calm down. But Leo refuses, pointing out they're about to meet the Emperor himself, so panicking is completely justified. Then his mood flips instantly, and he starts getting excited, talking about noble parties and how the capital is supposedly filled with beautiful women. Karen just sighs, clearly done with him. Out of nowhere, Sabina shows up, full of energy, saying the capital, Dacis, is an incredible place, crowded, lively, and packed with insanely strong people. Leo looks confused, asking what she's even doing there. She casually says she came to celebrate their first mission and asks where the wine glasses are. Karen gives her the most unimpressed look possible and asks why she'd expect to find wine glasses in a 13-year-old's room. Without missing a beat, she shrugs and says as long as it holds wine, any cup works. She hands them random cups and asks Leo if he's ever had alcohol before. Leo admits he's only had a few sips because of Karen. Sabina sighs, calling Karen out for dragging his younger brother into his wine-stealing antics. But Leo just shrugs it off, saying if they're getting in trouble, they might as well do it together. Sabina pours him a drink and tells him not to hesitate since she's the one serving it. Then she gets a little sentimental, saying both of them have grown up well. Karen thanks her, and she continues, mentioning it's already been 3 years since she promised to train him. She admits she's a bit disappointed she won't get to witness the chaos he's about to stir up in the capital. Leo mentions he heard she's heading back to the North Sea soon, and suddenly he gets emotional, asking if they'll never meet again. Sabina immediately roasts him, saying with that level of sensitivity, there's no way he'll survive socializing with women at capital parties. Leo turns red, embarrassed, and she adds another warning. If he does attend parties, he should probably avoid going with Karen. Confused, Leo asks why. She explains that with Karen's looks, talent, and smooth way of speaking, it's obvious what will happen. It hits Leo instantly. His brother is going to steal all the attention. He puts a hand on Karen's shoulder, joking that he's ruining his future chances at marriage. Karen tells him to stop talking nonsense and just drink. Meanwhile, we cut to Halo, who's also drinking, because apparently that runs in the family. There's a knock at the door. It's Pale. Halo tells him to come in, and Pale asks if he called for him. Halo confirms and brings up the Bellis negotiations, saying he heard they wrapped things up and even agreed to give part of their share to the boys, which is pretty surprising. Pale explains that the young Baron's opinion carried a lot of weight, and Bellis framed it as an investment for the future. Halo nods, impressed, saying the Baron's son is sharp and that having strong allies is always beneficial. He tells Pale he's leaving the Bellis matter entirely in his hands, and Pale agrees to handle it. Halo pours him a drink. Pale thanks him, but his expression turns serious. He says Halo doesn't give praise without reason, so there must be something else going on, probably related to Karen's trip to the capital. Halo confirms it, pointing out that emperors rarely summon anyone directly, aside from himself, so Karen being called is highly unusual. Pale says he figured as much. Halo continues, explaining that during his private meeting, he noticed the same fear in the emperor's eyes, the kind of fear that comes from knowing Halo overthrew the previous tyrant and worrying he might do it again. That's why he suspects other political forces are at play. Pale asks if he thinks it's all political maneuvering, and Halo says without a doubt. Pale points out that with so many powerful families gathering in the capital, Halo could have simply declined the Emperor's request, but he didn't. He asks why. Halo smiles and says he wants to see what Karen is truly capable of. Pale is caught off guard. Halo explains that Karen was chosen by the ancestral blade, meaning whether he likes it or not, he's destined to stand at the center of their family. As a member of House Reston, he'll constantly face pressure and threats. That's exactly why Halo didn't refuse. If Karen is going to carry the family's future, he needs to prove he can handle it. He asks Pale if he's worried about his son. Pale immediately starts drinking so fast he chokes, coughing everywhere. Halo laughs, and Pale admits honestly that he trusts his son. Halo looks at him with pride, saying that's exactly what he wanted to hear. The next morning, Sabina has her horse ready to leave. Zur asks if she's really not going to say goodbye to the boys, and she replies that she already shared drinks with them last night, so that's enough. Zur complains about everyone stealing his liquor. Sabina adds that the boys will be busy heading to the capital today anyway, so it's better for her to leave quietly. She says she's looking forward to seeing them again. Zur says he'll keep the wine stocked until then. Just before leaving, she glances up at Karen's window, where he bows to her. She smiles, saying they'll meet again. She heads back to the North Sea, her home, reminding Karen he's always welcome to visit, and that she'll be waiting with good wine. Karen reflects that she really left with nothing but a letter. Now that she's gone, even his uncles might start making moves. Right on cue, Tails appears, mentioning their aunt has left. Karen just mutters, perfect timing. A few days later, the boys are ready to depart. At the train station, Henrik is busy making sure everything is in order, asking if all the luggage has been loaded. Everyone confirms, while others fuss over their outfits. Karen gets irritated and asks Zur why they're making such a big deal out of this. Zur reminds him they're about to meet the Emperor as representatives of the entire family, so appearances matter. Karen accepts that, but then questions why Han's entire squad is tagging along. Zur says it's for protection, but Hans calls him out, saying it's more because they're worried Karen will cause trouble. Karen complains that with so many people around, this trip is going to be exhausting. We get a flashback to when Tails approached him earlier. After greeting him, Tails asked if he was heading to the capital. Karen confirmed. Tails then said he had a favor, He hopes Karen won't act in the capital the same way he does at the fortress. Karen immediately realizes what he means and sarcastically notes that it sounds like he's been spying on him. Tails doesn't deny it, saying the capital is full of enemies who want to bring their family down. If Karen gives them even the slightest excuse, he'll personally deal with him. Karen thanks him mockingly, saying he'll be sure to live up to expectations. Tails tells him to return safely before leaving. Karen watches him go, smirking to himself, thinking that if Tails believes he can suppress him just because he's the first prince, he's mistaken. He's already planning to make that arrogant expression disappear someday. Back in the present, preparations are complete. Karen warns Hans not to cause trouble. Just then, the large man from earlier arrives late, apologizing and thanking Karen for giving him another chance. Karen bluntly says he only brought him along to throw him in prison later and tells him not to get comfortable. An announcement calls for boarding, and Hans tells Zur they're leaving. Zur reminds them not to cause trouble in the capital. Karen jokes that anyone watching would think they're a group of delinquents. Zur gives a cryptic remark about a cracked bowl leaking both inside and out, then tells them it's time to go. Just before boarding, Pale rushes in, saying he barely made it. Karen is surprised to see him. Pale explains he was called there by Karen's grandfather, but wanted to see his son one last time before he left. He mentions that Karen's maternal grandfather is looking forward to his arrival. Karen smiles, saying he can't wait to see him and is sure he's prepared plenty of gifts. Pale places a hand on his shoulder, telling him to return safely and not cause too much trouble. The scene shifts to Tails' room, where he receives a report that Karen and Leo have left. The messenger also mentions that the second prince's wife is plotting something in the capital, but Tails dismisses it as none of his concern. The train finally departs, and Karen remarks that it took long enough. He asks Hans how long the journey will take. Hans says around 6 hours and mentions they'll pass through the TB autonomous territory. Karen asks about it, and Leo eagerly explains that it's a unique city where commoners elect their own mayor, and commerce and industry thrive more than agriculture. Karen asks if it's the place where most of the empire's wealth circulates. Hans confirms, adding that wealth equals influence, which gives the territory significant power, though it also draws resentment from other nobles. Karen recalls that some serfs flee oppressive lords and seek refuge there. Hans confirms they're on good terms with the fortress and occasionally request assistance from their knights. Karen finds it interesting and says he'd like to visit someday. As the train approaches the territory, Karen is already thinking about sneaking away after their official duties. Leo says he wants to come too. Suddenly, Leo senses something. His sword reacts. His expression changes instantly. Whenever it reacts like that, it means danger is nearby. He starts considering possibilities. Could Tails or Raphael have planted someone among them? No, that seems unlikely. Then it clicks. He urgently tells Hans to contact the territory immediately. Hans is confused, but Karen insists there's no time. They need to warn them about an incoming attack. Hans begins sending messages while Karen wonders how anyone would attack a moving train. Then the answer appears, explosives lined along the tracks. Back in the TB territory, chaos is already unfolding. Officials are panicking as a tax investigation tears through their operations. One man even admits to money laundering, causing everyone to turn on each other. They demand the mayor say something, but he's having an existential crisis, regretting ever taking the job. He thought the territory would be a place of opportunity, but instead it's constant conflict between classes. Suddenly, a man rushes in, whispers something to the mayor, and leaves. When asked what's going on, the mayor casually says it's nothing minor. He lights a match dramatically as everyone grows confused. Then he drops the news. The train heading to the capital has exploded. The one carrying the Grand Duke's grandchildren. The room goes silent. He looks at them and says plainly, they're all finished. The scene cuts to Karen regaining consciousness, his vision slowly clearing as he sees Hans standing over him. Hans asks if he's all right, and Karen casually responds that he's fine. While wrapping bandages around Leo, Hans asks for a quick status report. They inform him that 11 people are injured, 1 critically and 2 with minor wounds. The critically injured one is Dale, and 2 passengers from their carriage didn't survive. Karen notes that even Yura is reacting, which means the situation is worse than it looks. Karen asks where they are, and Hans tells him they're about 10 kilometers from the TB territory. He adds that he already contacted them earlier, so with Karen and the others awake, reinforcements should already be on the way. Hans then tells Karen that he and his squad will hold the line while Karen and Leo run as far as they can. He asks if Karen understands, but Karen is focused on his blade. It's reacting again, meaning the attackers are close. He glances toward the window and spots movement, feet just outside. He apologizes to Hans, saying running isn't an option. Hans asks why, and Karen answers coldly. These people attacked the Emperor's railway. That's treason. He's not about to run from trash like that. He turns to Leo and asks if he can still fight. Leo nods. Without hesitation, Karen slashes through the legs of one attacker outside the train. The man collapses, and Karen finishes his thought. There's only one choice. They eliminate every last one of them right here. Karen, Hans, and Leo step off the train. Karen scans the area and mutters that there are more enemies than he expected. The knights follow behind, forming up as tension fills the air. It's a full-on standoff. Hans notes that every one of them is at least 3-star level, and Karen agrees, pointing out that the one leading them is at least 6-star. The leader steps forward, his voice distorted by magic, and orders Karen to drop his weapon and surrender. He promises that if Karen cooperates, the knights and servants will be spared. Karen immediately understands their objective. They want him alive. He asks Hans if he realizes what that means. Hans hesitates, but Karen cuts him off. Of course he does. They can't kill him, but he can kill them. That's all he needs. Hans and Leo stare at him like he's lost his mind. Karen doesn't wait. He charges forward, cutting down an enemy instantly. The rest rush in, and the battlefield erupts into chaos as knights and assassins clash. Karen shouts that they need to break through to the back line and wipe them out all at once, but he notices the assassins hesitating. Confused, he wonders if he should make the first move instead. Some of the attackers complain that this wasn't part of the deal, but their leader orders them to stand down. He'll deal with Karen personally. Karen smirks, thinking it's about time, but before he can move, Hans steps in front of him, blocking his path. Caught off guard, Karen asks what he's doing. Hans warns him that this opponent is too dangerous and tells him to stay back. The leader mocks Hans, saying he's rushing toward his own death. Hans simply smirks and says they'll find out. Without wasting a second, he launches himself forward, leaping into the air. The assassin meets him head-on, and their clash sends sparks flying in every direction. But in the next instant, the assassin effortlessly deflects Hans' blade, sending him crashing to the ground. Hans hits hard and immediately realizes something is off. That deflection was too precise. As he stands, he analyzes the movements and comes to a conclusion. He knows exactly who this is. This 6-star opponent is Shahak, a knight of the Pabar Sultanate within the Empire. The problem is, the Empire and the Sultanate have a non-aggression pact. They're not supposed to be enemies. So why is someone like him targeting Karen? The Sultanate and the Ducal House have no conflict. But standing there won't give him answers. He'll have to force them out. Meanwhile, the fight continues, and surprisingly, the young masters are holding their ground. But Shahak isn't interested in distractions. He charges straight at Hans, forcing him onto the defensive and asking if he really has time to lose focus. Hans fires back, saying Shahak's formation has already collapsed. He unleashes his aura, blasting Shahak backward and resetting the flow of battle. He warns him that resistance is pointless and tells him to surrender while he still can. Shahak glances around, realizing his allies have been taken down. Hans tells him there's no need to die for nothing. If he surrenders now, he can at least live. But Shahak refuses, saying he has no interest in convincing someone who doesn't understand. He'll complete his mission no matter what. Then his eyes shift, black and red. Hans immediately recognizes it. Blood vessels bursting. As Shahak's aura distorts, Hans explains this is mana backlash. He has no intention of surviving. At this rate, capturing him is impossible, and worse, the young masters are now in serious danger. So Hans releases his own mana completely, preparing to endure whatever is coming. His eyes glow as he braces himself. Shahak charges in, and just as the clash is about to reach its peak, Karen's voice cuts in, calm, almost disappointed. He points out that he thought he came along to prevent trouble, but now Hans is the one causing chaos. Has he already given up on protecting them? Shahak turns in shock as Karen suddenly joins the fight. Karen doesn't hesitate. He charges forward and slices through Shahak's arm in one clean motion. The severed limb flies through the air. Shahak retreats immediately, calling Karen a monster. Karen shrugs it off, saying he'll take that as a compliment. Then his blade reacts again. He frowns, realizing there's still danger. He demands to know what Shahak is planning. Shahak calmly apologizes, confusing Karen. Then his mana surges wildly. Hans immediately understands what's about to happen. He shouts for everyone to protect Leo. Leo stands there, completely stunned, while the others rush to shield him. Hans tackles Karen to the ground, covering him. Karen demands to know what he's doing, and Hans shouts back. It's a self-destruction spell. This is happening because he underestimated the enemy. The mana spirals violently as Shahak's body begins to break apart. Then, explosion. Hans shields Karen with his own body. In that moment, Karen hears a voice in his head, calling him a fool. It says that since he allowed them to taste fresh night blood, they'll return the favor. It warns him to close his eyes unless he wants them to burst. When Karen regains awareness, he kicks Hans, telling him to stop lying there. Hans protests, saying he just protected him, asking where the gratitude is. Karen bluntly replies that he never asked to be saved. The voice speaks again, saying that without their help, things would have ended much worse. Karen pauses, confused, wondering where the voice is coming from. He looks down at his blade as it continues speaking, saying Shahak has likely been reduced to nothing. Karen stares at it in disbelief. The sword is talking, and it's talking a lot. To put it into perspective, the second explosion was far larger than the first. Later, as soldiers help each other out of the wreckage, Karen is still stuck on the talking sword situation. He recalls hearing stories about blacksmiths forging blades with souls, creating weapons that can speak. The sword immediately snaps back, threatening to cut his head off if he compares it to something like that again. Karen fires back, asking why it even bothered saving him if it's so easily offended. The blade calls him pathetic, saying if it hadn't used up its stored power protecting him, it would have already done exactly that. Another carriage approaches, and Hans prepares for more enemies, but Karen assures him it's not. The sword complains that it's completely drained and exhausted. Karen asks if it needs to kill enemies to recharge, and it casually suggests it could also draw energy from his blood. A knight steps out, introducing himself as Captain Hyrie of the TB Vigilante Corps. Karen casually remarks that if the sword really wants his blood, it's definitely a demonic weapon. The sword, clearly fed up, says it's going back into the scabbard and refuses to deal with him anymore. Karen doesn't mind, saying it should stay quiet anyway. Hyrie explains that the territory feels responsible and has been ordered to escort them safely. Karen nods, saying they have many injured and will rely on their help. As they ride in the carriage, Karen sits in the back, covered in blood. Hans asks if they should return to the fortress instead of continuing. The investigation is still ongoing, and there's no guarantee the danger is over. Karen says it's fine. They already contacted Zur, and he should be on his way. Besides, the Imperial Guard is likely moving as well. What matters more is the attacker. He asks Hans if he knows him. Hans confirms. He was a 6-star knight from the Pabar Sultanate named Shahak. Karen processes this, noting that the Sultanate lies beyond the desert to the east. If they're involved, it could mean the non-aggression pact is breaking down. Hans agrees relations have been worsening, but this kind of move is unusual. Karen points out that regardless, this alone could justify war. He asks Leo if he agrees. Leo says yes, but in truth, he wasn't even listening. His hands are trembling as he holds a blood-soaked uniform. He admits he can't stop shaking. Karen understands. It was Leo's first time killing someone. That's not something you get used to easily. But he tells him he has to overcome it, because that's what it means to survive. As they arrive, the mayor greets them, relieved they made it safely and promising full cooperation in the investigation. Karen cuts him off, saying he already knows they had nothing to do with the attack. And just like that, the next phase begins. Hans backs that up, telling the mayor, Gren, that he can relax. Then he adds that Gren seems quite different compared to his days as Minister of Finance. Gren grimaces, saying he'd rather not be reminded of that, and admits he regrets ever taking this position. He apologizes for rambling in front of noble guests, but Karen cuts him off, telling him to speak freely. He's not interested in stiff formalities from someone older than him. Gren hesitates. unsure how casual he's allowed to be with someone of ducal blood. Karen jokingly tells him to prove sincerity by kneeling, then immediately walks it back. Gren quickly agrees to just accept the kindness instead. Karen suggests they move somewhere more private to continue the discussion. Once settled, he pours Gren a glass of wine and begins laying out his theory. According to him, the attack wasn't carried out by regular forces, it was the work of smugglers. The attackers didn't rely on magic, but instead used explosives to destroy the railway. And those kinds of explosives can't easily be obtained through official military channels. Gren nods, confirming that's true. Karen continues, explaining that the Empire's armament procurement agency tightly controls its stockpiles, making theft nearly impossible. But if the explosives were smuggled in from outside the Empire, say, from the Sultanate, that would explain everything. Gren immediately understands where he's going with this. Only the Empire and the Sultanate are capable of producing explosives of that quality. Karen then asks the real question. Are merchants within the TB territory involved in this smuggling? Because if they are, that puts Gren in a very dangerous position. Gren is visibly impressed by how sharp Karen's reasoning is and admits that the possibility is high. Karen adds that if Gren denies it outright, he could easily end up being labeled an accomplice. With reckless smugglers running operations, it wouldn't take much for someone to become a scapegoat. Then Karen leans forward slightly and tells him to remember one thing. Gren asks nervously what that is. Karen says this incident has directly harmed the fortress and its knights. That's all it takes. Gren understands the implication immediately. He's being pulled into house arrest in Zorbit, a family known for repaying favors tenfold, but grudges 100-fold. If he doesn't cooperate, he's finished. Trying to shift the mood, Gren asks how Karen's father is doing. Karen raises an eyebrow, asking if he even knows him personally. Gren quickly claims they're practically like brothers. Karen smirks, saying that performance alone proves he's a politician. Gren wipes his sweat and replies that presentation is everything for people like him. At that moment, Gren's assistant rushes in, announcing that they've finally received word from the capital. Gren assumes it's about the Imperial Guard being dispatched, but the assistant shakes his head. It's more than that. The Commissioner of the National Tax Service himself is on the move, leading Special Division 1. Gren's face drains of color. That man is infamous, nicknamed the Demon King. His name is Commissioner Gale Furish. Gren stammers, asking if he's really coming here in person. Then he turns to Karen, asking if he already knew. Karen casually replies that his grandfather dotes on him, so of course he'd go all out to protect his grandson. In other words, the tax authority isn't coming to play games. Cut to another part of the TB territory. People are going about their day when they suddenly notice a massive force of armed soldiers marching through the streets. At the rear of the formation stands Gale himself. Bystanders whisper from alleyways, surprised at how quickly he arrived. Apparently, this situation involves family, and when family is involved, he wastes no time. Back at the mayor's office, the Merchant Guild representatives are in full panic mode. They're shouting, demanding to know why a sudden tax investigation has been launched and why it has to start immediately. Back in the hall, the merchants are completely losing it. Like, seriously, who dropped something like this on them out of nowhere? They needed time to cover up all their shady business. At the very least, their puppet mayor should have stalled things long enough for them to clean house. And to make it worse, it's Special Division 1 handling the audit, the absolute worst-case scenario. Gren just sits there, thinking, these idiots still don't understand how doomed they are, even after everything he's done to shield them. That's when Karen steps forward and drops the truth. He reminds them this isn't some small offense. They destroyed Imperial Railway tracks, attacked the grandson of Duke Reston along with fortress personnel, and used smuggled explosives, most likely funneled through their own merchant guild. So yeah, there's a very good reason the Emperor's personal tax enforcers are knocking right now. The merchants finally realize they're finished. One of them tries to recover, saying he just meant they should have been given time to prepare properly. Karen asks for his name, and the guy actually answers, Viscount Humorer of the Humor Merchant Guild. Karen smiles. Good. I'll make sure to mention you by name to my grandfather. You know, the Commissioner of the National Tax Service. The guy instantly turns pale, scrambling to take it back. But it's already too late. The door swings open, and Special Division 1 walks in. The room goes silent as Gale announces that starting now, a full audit of all merchant guilds will begin. They've received reports of smuggling, tax evasion, and illegal wealth accumulation, and the emperor himself ordered this investigation. Karen just watches, thinking his grandfather looks way better in a military uniform than in some boring civil servant clothes. Off to the side, Leo quietly asks Hans if Division 1 is really that terrifying. Hans explains they deal with the biggest targets, major guilds and noble houses, and they even have the authority to mobilize the Imperial Guard. Basically, they're the fantasy world's IRS. Leo nods slowly. So, if you don't pay taxes, you get destroyed. While they're talking, Gale approaches Karen. It's been 3 years. He asks how he's been. Karen respectfully says he's doing well and is glad to see him. Gale checks if he needs medical attention, but Karen insists he's fine. Then Gale gets straight to it. Does Karen have any suspects? Karen says no. If his uncles were behind this, there'd be no evidence. But whoever planned this attack left clues everywhere, almost like they wanted it to look like the PAB Sultanate. It's too obvious. Gale pats his head, saying he knows Karen wants to hunt them down himself. But as his grandfather, he's against it. Not because he doubts him, but because the world is dangerous, and there are still enemies nearby. It's better to stay put and head to the capital tomorrow as ordered. The adults will handle everything. Karen smiles and agrees. But Gale immediately sees through it. Karen's eyes are glowing with aura, and that grin says everything. In his mind, Gale already knows. This kid is absolutely not staying put. Cut to a merchant's residence. The man is panicking, rushing to load everything onto carriages. He sends his family away first, telling them he'll follow soon. Once they leave, he notices someone watching from the rooftops. He mutters about being tailed, no room for mistakes. Meanwhile, back at Karen's place, he's up late polishing guillotine. Zur walks in, asking if he's planning to cause trouble again. Karen fires back, asking if he came just to lecture him. Zur explains he's there with orders from the head of the house. The moment Karen gets the chance, he's to find the culprits and make them pay, with blood, for every life lost. Karen laughs. That was already his plan. Later that night, Karen and Leo head into the city. They're heading for the black market to meet an informant. Leo complains about having to play the servant, but Karen says his haircut makes it believable, and 2 noble kids wandering alone would look suspicious. In a dark alley, a man approaches. Karen reaches for his sword, but the guy quickly says Zur sent him. His name is Julio, and he leads them to a carriage with soundproofing artifacts so they can talk safely. Karen gets straight to the point. Julio confirms only 2 groups deal in black market explosives, Karua and Kigo. Karua recently pulled out. Kigo, on the other hand, is made up of former slaves who'll do anything for money, and they left the city around the time of the attack. That's suspicious enough. They head to Kigo's hideout, but guards block their way, saying no clients are allowed today. Tension rises. Karen provokes them, and when they reach for their weapons, he strikes first. Leo follows, realizing there was never a second plan. Karen just made it up. They take the guards down quickly. Then a woman's voice stops everything. She tells them to stand down. Karen realizes she's the leader. She invites them inside, even though she clearly knows who they are. Karen keeps the guards as hostages, just in case. Inside, things escalate fast. Karen suddenly grabs a masked boy as a hostage, only to realize the insane aura behind him belongs to an 8-star knight. That's when it clicks. The kid is the 6th prince. Things get chaotic, but eventually calm down when Pina, the elf president, arrives. She explains they didn't carry out the attack. They deal in explosives, yes, but for research, not terrorism. And whoever did this isn't Karua either. They're not capable of something this big. She offers Karen information on the real culprit, but with one condition. He has to become friends with the 6th prince. Karen immediately sees the problem. Getting involved with the imperial family is politically dangerous, but Leo argues it could actually benefit them. The prince himself casually admits he just wants to mess with his father. Karen calls him insane. Still, he listens. Later, using the intel, Karen tracks down the real culprit, Alm. The man is trying to flee, thinking everything would have worked if Karen had died. Karen confronts him, breaks him mentally, and has him arrested. He spares the man's family, but makes it clear Alm will suffer for his crimes. Back at the mayor's office, Karen proposes going public with everything. The attack, the investigation, all of it. It's a risky move, but it works. The mayor gives a powerful speech, exposing the corruption and rallying the people. The city erupts. The corrupt council is finished. Even back at the rest-stunned mansion, Halo is impressed. Karen didn't just get revenge. He reshaped the political landscape in one move.